Hi grade 5s, welcome to your next recorded math lesson. Today's title is Performing Rotations. Our learning intentions and success criteria are: I am learning to describe and analyze the position and motion of shapes so that I can identify, describe, and perform transformations of shapes and objects. I'll know I have it when I can identify, describe, and perform rotations of objects. Okay, so today we're doing the final type of transformation that we learn about in grade 5, and that is a rotation. A rotation is also called a turn, and it is the result of turning a shape. Okay, the next term that you need to know is the center of rotation. It's also called the point of rotation, and that is the point that the shape turns around. Okay, so I'll show you some examples of that shortly. You can also turn a point clockwise, so that's the direction that the hands on a clock move, or you can turn a shape counterclockwise, which is the opposite direction to clockwise. Okay, and these are the abbreviations that you can use, CW and CCW, so you don't have to write out the words every single time. Okay, so you can rotate a shape a quarter, a half, or 3/4. Okay, we know that a half is the same as 2/4 because we just finished our fractions unit, so you know that those are the same, they're equivalent fractions, and so when you divide your grid into 4 pieces, you know that 2 of those pieces is equivalent to 1/2. Okay, so this is a little image of a rotation here. So the blue shape was rotated a 1/4 turn clockwise, okay? It was also rotated 3/4 of a turn counterclockwise, and I'm gonna explain that a little bit more in the next slide. Okay, so if the image doesn't say which direction the object is transformed, then there are 2 possible options for that rotation, okay? And that's why I said in the last slide that this shape was transformed a 1/4 turn clockwise or 3/4 of a turn counterclockwise. Okay, so what is the rotation from the blue shape to the red shape? Okay, so we start with the blue shape and we end with the red shape. Okay, so like I said, it's either a 1/4 of a turn clockwise or 3/4 of a turn counterclockwise. Okay, and that's because there's no arrow telling us which direction to go. So you can pick either one and either of those answers would be correct. Okay, so in this image though, we do see an arrow. So the arrow is moving in a counterclockwise direction. So our only option here is 3/4 of a turn counterclockwise. Okay, now you may be wondering, how do I know it's 3/4 of a turn? And that's because you'll see that this grid is divided into 4 quadrants. Okay, so the blue shape is in this quadrant right here, in this top right quadrant. Okay, if we move counterclockwise, like the arrow is telling us, into the next quadrant, that's 1 out of 4 quadrants. The next quadrant would be 2 out of 4 quadrants. And the final quadrant where the red shape ended up is 3 out of 4 quadrants. So we know, based on the quadrants that have been drawn on here, that the shape has been a 3/4 turn. And we know it's counterclockwise because the arrow has shown us it's going in that direction. Okay, the next thing I wanted to ask you is, let me just erase all of this extra purple mark here. Which point, what is the center of rotation for this shape? Okay, so we know that the point always is rotating around, the center of all 4 quadrants. Okay, that's how we set it up. In some cases, you will have your rotation around a point that's actually on the shape. Okay, if it doesn't tell you which point of rotation or what the center of rotation is, then you can choose, and that's fine. Okay, so we're gonna now actually perform some rotations, which is what you will be doing today on your worksheet. Okay, so this one says rotate shape A, so this is shape A right here, half a turn counterclockwise. Okay, so the most important thing to remember is that you want to actually have your 4 quadrants. So I'm going to draw my 4 quadrants on this grid. Okay, I'm going to do it right here and right here. Okay, and so now my point of rotation is going to be that point right there. All right, so it wants me to do half a turn counterclockwise. So I know that if I do 2 quarters, that's equivalent to half a turn. So this one, I'm gonna move it 1 quarter over, 2 quarters over. So it's gonna end up in this quadrant right here, okay? Now, the next thing that you need to kind of figure out after you figure out which quadrant it goes into is what direction the shape is going to be in now, right? So I like to, if I'm ever struggling with it, I like to actually cut out of a piece of paper a shape that matches shape A, okay? And then you can actually place it down on the sheet of paper you're working with, and you can turn it the first quarter and the second quarter. So you've made a half turn, and then you'll see that the shape will actually end up looking like this. Okay, so this is now A prime. Okay, so, and that would be because if we look at, let's look at this side of shape A. If it had made a quarter turn going this way, that side would end up laying flat here. And then if it made 1 more quarter turn, then that shape ended up flat right here. Okay, and so that's how it happened. So if that's a struggle for you, I do recommend cutting out the shape out of a piece of paper and actually physically manipulating it and turning it yourself. Okay, I also could have chosen to make my center of rotation right there on the actual corner of the shape. Okay, and that might have made things a little bit more simple. Okay, I know that if I turn it a quarter of a turn, then this side here is going to end up right here, flat. And if I do another quarter of a turn, then it's going to end up here flat. And that's how we get this triangle here of A prime. Okay, so it's up to you where you want to put your center of rotation for this shape, because it doesn't tell you where it should be. Okay, next one. This one says rotate shape W. This is shape W. A quarter of a turn counterclockwise around point X. So this one does tell us that we need to rotate it around point X, which is that tippy point on the triangle there. Okay, so I'm now gonna draw my grid, my 4 quadrants right here, and I'm gonna make sure that they connect at point X. Okay, now I'm rotating it counterclockwise, so I'm going this way, okay, and I am going 1 quarter of a turn counterclockwise. So I know I'm going to end up only 1 quadrant over, so I will end up in this quadrant right here. Okay, so how's that going to look? Well, I know it's going to look a little something like, how many pieces do we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's going to go like that, and then it goes up 1 over here and like that. Okay, so even I have a bit of a hard time visualizing this in my head sometimes. So like I said, I really do recommend, if you can, cutting out the shape and actually physically manipulating it and turning it until you get used to how it's going to look without the paper. Okay, so I've done that so many times now that I can kind of do it without the paper now, but like I said, it's still a little bit of a struggle. So if you struggle with it, that's totally fine. Let me know. Call me on Zoom if you need to, and I'm happy to help. I love motion geometry. It's my favorite unit. I know I say that about every unit, but I really mean it this time. Okay, so your worksheet's called Performing Rotations, and I did lie earlier. You're not actually performing any rotations. You're identifying and describing them. So you don't have to do any of the stuff that I just showed you today. You will have to in the future. It's on Google Classroom, and it is due tomorrow.